This is a microphone. It's a microphone doing microphone stuff. Maybe. Is this live somewhere that we can watch it?
Like a full beard? Or just like trying to do a beard?
Hello. Hello.
That's quite hard to do, but we never can have it.
Is it working? Thank you. Am I
It will be synced.
It's just delayed.
It's just they won't be seeing it.
Good evening, and thank you all for joining us here tonight. Tonight, we're doing a bridge reveal for our 2023 competition bridge. My name is Krista Swartz, and I'm the project manager this year for the team. So just an overview of what we're going to go through during this live stream. First, I'm going to do a quick introduction, going over a little bit about our team and our competition. Then we'll be introducing our officer team as well as our build team, and then we'll be doing a build video as we bring in our bridge to reveal it. And then following that, we'll be doing a design overview, and then we'll be doing a Q&A session following that. So if you have any questions throughout the duration of the live stream, feel free to put those in the chat, and we'll answer them at the end. So a little bit about our competition. So we compete in the American Institute of Steel Construction Student Steel Bridge competition each year. At the beginning of the fall semester, we get a set of rules that they hand out, and they dictate different dimension requirements as well as design constraints to the overall bridge. So we jump into design right when we get those rules in the fall semester, and that's what we focus on. We also focus on training our team members and getting prepared for fabrication in the spring. Once the spring hits, we jump right into fabrication, and then from there, make sure we're ready for competition come April. So just later this week, we'll be traveling to Manhattan, Kansas to compete in our regional competition at K-State. So our team has put in a severe amount of work for this bridge, over 800 hours between design in the fall and then fabrication here in the spring, plus probably an extra couple hundred that haven't been counted for. I really admire our team's dedication to this project. So if you aren't familiar with our design center, this is an extracurricular activity. So none of our students are getting a grade for this. It's purely extracurricular, and I really admire their determination and time dedication to the project. All right. So later this week, we'll be traveling to Manhattan for our regional competition, like I mentioned. So we've done fairly well the past several years in competition. Past 4 years, we've taken first place in our region. And then last year, when we went to Virginia Tech for nationals, we placed 13th, which is the best our team has done in nearly 2 decades. Moving forward, we're now going to introduce our officer team. So as I mentioned, myself, I'm the project manager. I'm a senior in civil engineering here at S&T. Additionally, here we have our assistant project manager, Carter Blake, who is also a senior in civil engineering here at S&T. Next, we have our lead design, Patrick Keogh, who's also a senior in civil engineering. Next, we have our fabrication lead, Zach Parr, who is a sophomore in mechanical engineering. We have our secretary and treasurer, Seth Phillipson, who is a sophomore in civil engineering. And then we also have our chief of PR, Hannah Butkovich, who could not make it tonight, but she's been doing a great job for us. I'd like to thank you all for your dedication to the team and appreciate you immensely. All right, next we're going to be moving into the build portion of our live stream. So there are 2 main things that go into our score at competition. That includes the construction cost as well as the structural efficiency. So with the construction cost, different things go into that score. So the number of builders we have, as well as how long it takes to assemble the bridge. So you have to figure out what's the most optimized time in accordance with the number of builders. So initially, you'll see in this build video that we have, we started with 4 builders, and then over the weekend, we ended up moving up to 6 builders, just because previously we were getting build times in 18 minutes. With the addition of 2 extra builders, we're able to get our time down significantly, which makes it more cost effective. So here we are standing in our build arena. So if you aren't familiar with our competition, all the members start at the outer edges, and then we rush to put them together. So with this, there's a river in the center area. So the river this year is 7 feet wide, which was a little bit of a challenge when designing the bridge, as well as figuring out how to put this together over this large river. Additionally, we have our pier boxes here, which the bridge needs to stay in at all times. As I mentioned, there's penalties for if things are dropped, such as nuts, bolts, different members, or if you touch the river, and you're not allowed to cross the river either. So without further ado, we're going to jump into introducing our build team. So our build team this year, first up, we have our build captain, Zach Parr, who I previously introduced as our fabrication lead, who's a sophomore in mechanical engineering. We also have Seth Phillipson joining our build team. Next, we have Garrett Coggin, who is also a member of our build team last year, who is a sophomore in civil engineering. And then Patrick Disler, who is a senior in civil engineering. And then Ben Walter, who is a freshman in mechanical engineering. Additionally, we'll have Kyle Bryan, who is a junior in civil engineering, but he couldn't make it here tonight. Thank you all for your dedication. And you guys probably aren't aware of this, but we've been trying to practice late at night just because that's when everyone's free. So the past several nights, it's been 9 o'clock, 9:30 build practices until 11:30 midnight. So thank you for your dedication. All right, and with that, we'll go ahead and stream our build video.
So here we have our 2023 steel bridge for this year's competition. We're going to do a quick design overview of the specifications of the bridge. We have a 23-foot span length. That's the longest span length we've had, I know personally, and also I think in the last 10 years. And we also have a wide river this year at 7 feet. So it posed a really peculiar challenge to us this year. I know me and Chris had a lot of fun designing it. Yeah, it's 23 feet in length. It's about 4 feet tall. The rail sections are about 6 inches deep. We have square piers on each side. They stand up on their own. Yeah, and each piece of it, I'll get the member box. So each member of our bridge has to fit into this member box. It's dimensioned, it's not perfect, but it's dimensioned at 3 feet and then 4 inches by 6 inches. That's why we can't just build the bridge and have it all built before you get there. And so every little piece of the bridge poses a unique challenge to us, including just like how to fit everything together. Like I mentioned before, the 7-foot river made it really hard to get a full bridge length this year with all our connections in place because you can't touch the river while you're building it. So we had to make sure that every connection was in a comfortable place we could get to, while also minimizing our deflection with the bridge as well. Krista, you want to talk about some of the connections?
So this year, we weren't allowed to use any interlocking or mechanical connections similar to last year's rules. So each connection point has to be a fang surface, touching another fang surface with a bolt penetrating those surfaces. So it posed some, interesting problems again this year, like Patrick was saying. It's always a challenge. So with this, we did some connection testing in the fall. We designed some mock connections as well as then performed a 4-point flexure test as well as tensile testing on them to get an idea of how they would perform under those loads. And then from that data, we selected different connections for our rails, as well as like our truss to truss connections, all of these different aspects based off of that data. All right.
One last little thing I want to hit on is you notice some of our unique little laterals there. We have some X laterals on the truss, and then we have switched connections on the truss pieces to make sure it resists as much torsion as it can. And each connection we've had we had to think a lot on how to get the best resistances and the best forces out of them. Yeah, and we want to transition to the next part of our.
All right. So if you have any questions, feel free to put those in the chat now, and we'll do our Q&A after a quick conclusion here. But just in conclusion, I'd like to thank you all for tuning in tonight to see our bridge and wish us well for our competition later this week. I'd like to give a special thanks to the Design Center and the Design Center staff. They make an amazing team and allow us to do everything that we do here at the Design Center. Additionally, I'd like to thank the Civil, Architectural, and Environmental Engineering Department for supporting our team as well, in addition to all of our alumni. Often we reach out to them for critical design reviews or also help whenever we run into issues on the design side or the fabrication side. We really appreciate their continued support. Additionally, we wouldn't be able to be a team without our faculty advisor, Dr. Libre. We appreciate him stepping in whenever we need advice, as well as previous faculty advisor and bridge team founder, Dr. Lebu. Additionally, when students travel to competition, it doesn't come at any cost to them. So we rely on company donors to be able to go to competition. So I'd like to thank our donors for this year. We have Horner and Schifrin, Bull Moose Tube and Steel, Brinkman Constructors, OCCI, Power Engineers, Capital Holding Group, Nucor, Bi-State Fabricators, Boeing Engineered Tower Solutions, Holland Construction, as well as Craft and Toll. We appreciate your support of our team, whether it's monetary or material donations. You allow us to do what we do. Additionally, this year, we had a team sponsor for our competition season, Lexicon Fabricators. They made a very generous donation that will allow us to be able to compete regional and the national level this year, as well as for years to come. All right, and with that, we're going to take a quick break. So feel free, as I mentioned, to put any questions you have in the Q&A, and we'll be right back to answer those. All right, so I believe we had a question come in about how do we fabricate our bridge starting from just a bunch of stock steel. So we do a lot of training in the fall semester. We do welding trainings as well as trainings on machines put on by the design center. So with things like our connections, like our machine connections for our rails, those were made from solid stock. So they were machined using the mill and lathe, the manual ones. And then additionally, for any of our other plated connections, many of those were done in a water jet file using an OMAX software. As far as the different aspects of the bridge, like the truss, the rails, we set up jigs just to make sure that everything's going to be straight, nothing is going to warp. Yes, so from there, it's really just a process going through and starting from that scrap steel, we cut everything. And then from there, we move into putting it all in the jigs, welding it together, attaching those connections, and then assembling the final product. So somebody asked what the most common point deduction during building is. So we have point deductions for if pieces drop, bolts, nuts, or if you touch the river. So in years previous, if you touch the river, it added a builder to your score, so an additional multiplier. However, this year, touching the river is just an extra 2 minutes. Typically, you don't see very many river touches at competition. In our build practices, we've maybe had 1 or 2. So that's a more uncommon one. I would say the most common is definitely dropping nuts and bolts. It's easy to, when you're in the heat of the moment and you're trying to go as quickly as possible, things drop. It happens. But we try to minimize that just through repetition and making sure that, you take some deep breaths before competition. And so dropping a nut or a bolt or even a piece of the bridge outside of the pier box or outside of the member zone is a 15-point penalty for each occurrence. Yeah, so let's start with the lows. So this year, this bridge posed a challenge. It was completely different from the bridge we designed last year, and a lot of our team was newer to the design process. Since the year before, we didn't design a full bridge because we had just used the previous year's design because they continued that competition to make it a 2-year competition due to COVID the previous year. So kind of going from a very different design to a design like this, it was a challenge trying to figure out how to get a 23-foot unsupported span with not horrible deflection. Since last year, we had a cantilever design, which had about a 16-foot unsupported span, and we also gained a lot of positive deflection from the cantilever end. Additionally, some challenges we had were learning the software through the design process. It's a fairly new thing to us, and we try to get advice from upperclassmen, previous alumni, as well as faculty advisors. So the first bridge that we fabricated actually did not pass load test. It had a torsion failure due to the fact that we didn't run a P delta analysis for buckling on it. So thankfully, we were able to get it together. We ran a P delta analysis, and in one weekend, we had a different design, made some alterations, and we were able to make fabrication changes within that week and retest. Definitely the highs on this team, I would say, for me, is always the fabrication process, seeing the finished bridge. It's really just, really rewarding to see a pile of steel turn into something like this whenever you go to pick it up from the shop where you're picking up your steel from. Additionally, another high I'd say was definitely seeing how the team reacted after we failed that first load test, seeing how people weren't shutting down, seeing people stepping up. They were all messaging me saying, hey, if there's anything I can do, let me know. Having that feeling that, the team has your back and they're dedicated to this project, it really just, as a leader of the team, it made me feel good. And I'm truly grateful to have such dedicated and determined members to work with. I would say we're confident in our win at regionals, though it's always dependent. So this year there were a lot of design changes. So you never know how the other teams are going to react. While our deflection is more than we anticipated or that we would like it to be, we understand this is a much longer span. Additionally, with our build time, everybody has the same issues that we have with this long river and the wide reach, the fact that it's a long bridge, it's going to have more pieces and you can't do interlocking connections. Everyone's kind of in the same boat. So we've put as much work as possible as we can into this bridge. And I like to say we're confident that we will perform well at regionals. Okay. So as far as nationals, I think our goal would be being in the top half. I think it's doable even after regionals. If we continue on to nationals, we'll be continuing build practices, maybe even looking into optimizing the bridge further with the time that we have through the design and fabrication process. But the top half would be our goal at nationals. All right. If you guys want to keep sending questions, feel free to do so. But I want to let you guys know that we will also be doing a live stream of our build at regional competition this weekend at Kansas State. So we don't have a set time that live stream will be going on, but it'll be a Facebook live stream. We're sixth to build. So with that, I would guess right now that it would be around noon, maybe 1 o'clock. But we'll be sending out information about that on our Facebook page as well. Okay, one more question. Yep.
Is our bridge tested on how much weight it can hold? And how exactly is the competition scored?
Yes, so the competition overall is based off of cost. So the two things that factor into that are your construction cost and then your structural efficiency. So as I mentioned earlier, the construction cost is based off of how many minutes it takes to build the bridge, as well as how many builders, and then any penalties accrued by dropping pieces or touching in the river. And then that's all put into a formula that outputs a cost. And then additionally, the structural efficiency takes into account the weight of the bridge, as well as how much it deflects under that load. So it's not how much weight can the bridge hold, rather than it's a set amount. So it's 2,500 pounds total. There are two load cases this year. So one is 1,400 pounds and one is 1,100 pounds. But the thing is, we don't know which load case scenario we're going to get or where this load is going to be placed until we get to competition. They actually roll a dice right before we start building. 1 through 6, there's 6 different scenarios where the load could be placed. So with that, we kind of design for the worst case scenario, but try to average it out across all of the load cases. So then we measure the deflection under the 2 separate loads and add that together to get our aggregate deflection under the 2,500 pound load. And then that amount of deflection is taken into account with a multiplier, as well as the weight of the bridge, into an equation to determine the output of the cost for the structural efficiency. And then the overall total cost is the structural efficiency plus the construction cost, and then lowest cost wins. All right. If you have any more questions, feel free to put them in. You can also reach out to us on our Instagram, Facebook, any of our social media or website. But with that, we'll be sure to update you guys on how we do at regional competition this weekend.
Once again, if anybody has any questions, feel free to ask. We'll be here until about 6:45. So